The more that news comes out, the more that people talk about it, the more Alec Baldwin talks about it. I really think that what we're seeing here is a story about a man being crushed by his own hubris. Last week I saw Nightmare Alley and Macbeth, the new one with Denzel Washington, and there's something very eternal, long-lasting about stories where someone ends up just assuming that they hold more power than they actually do, and they think that they are able to shift anything in the world. They have a certain level of power where they can make whatever needs to happen. And I think that is kind of the type of thing that's going on here, and it's very sad to see. And I think it's a sad story because for so long, Alec Baldwin has kind of had this persona of being a bit of a, I guess the best way you could say it is strong guy, the tough guy. The worst way you could say it is a jerk. And to see him kind of go through this certain level of pain, but doing that while not taking any responsibility is very difficult to watch. To see him regularly abdicate responsibility is very difficult to watch. That's very sad. But it's kind of what he's making the story into. He's making the story into himself, and he's kind of forcing everyone to, I don't know, they're forcing everyone to comment and reconcile with what is it that you actually think, particularly with the entertainment industry. For so long, they've been very much, people don't like the entertainment industry because they've become preachy recently. And I understand that. They really have. And to now actually be dealing with something, someone who's like a titan of their own industry going through something like this, and to see him in particular not own up to any responsibility, it puts pressure on the rest of the industry to see if there is anything of character within the rest of the industry. And that's another thing that we'll talk about in terms of what's going on, and because we've gotten a few celebrities that have now spoken up, and not so much in Alec Baldwin's favor. To catch everyone up, if you're not 100% sure what is going on so far with the Alec Baldwin story. So first of all, there was the day of the tragedy where Alec Baldwin he fired a gun that ended up killing the cinematographer Halyna Hutchins. The response immediately after, there was a while of silence, but then there was a while of him trying to get back to normal, it seemed, on social media, which I do not think played very well, posting things about his podcast, posting things about other work that he was doing at the time. I feel it was a very, very bad look for him. And then we had that ABC interview, and I really think that this whole Danny, the world needs to see an interview between you and Baldwin. That'd be interesting. Well, the weird thing about the interview, and also if anyone is watching, we are going to have another episode in about an hour where we go through more like movie stuff, but this is very much just an update on what's been going on with this story. In the ABC interview, it was very odd because he was not asked any questions that were pertinent to how the situation went down at all. It was much more of like a puff piece. And I also think that if it wasn't for that ABC interview, this whole Alec Baldwin thing probably wouldn't exist right now, at least. We'd know there's a trial coming, but no one would talk about anything. But Alec Baldwin decided to kind of lay it all out there, and a lot of the stuff that he said, I'm not going to say it didn't make sense, although a lot of people have said that it didn't make any sense. The problem with that ABC interview was that he actively said that he had no guilt at all. Not only had no guilt, was not guilty at all. And that, I think, made everyone realize we need to reassess what actually went on here. And through that, I think, is what is causing everyone to have to answer a lot of questions. Not so much about Alec Baldwin, but about how do we think, what's our relationship with celebrity? What is the celebrity's relationship with the rest of the audience? And then throughout all of that, throughout the investigation, throughout everything that's come out, the district attorney giving warnings to everyone that's been speaking up, because it's not just Baldwin that's been making a lot of very bold claims. We've seen Halyna Hutchins' father come out say that Alec Baldwin actually does hold more guilt than he is saying that he does. It just is changing a lot of things. And so if anyone is wondering why in the world does any of this matter, it is because there's always been a gulf between the audience and the entertainment industry, which has become an ocean. And I think that there is an opportunity that if this is dealt with correctly, Alec Baldwin is not dealing with it correctly, that the entertainment industry could actually come closer to the audience if we get more statements like the ones that we'll go through here soon, because Nicolas Cage recently said something about it. But to hone in on to the actual video, so Alec Baldwin made this New Year's video, and I'm gonna do kind of what it is that I did with the ABC interview, kind of break down the large things that he said, and kind of get us to where it is that I think that puts the narrative right now in this story. So CNN went ahead and put a posting. I wanted to look at what the media's wording was in terms of this story. So CNN says, in a video looking ahead to 2022, Baldwin reflected on the fatal shooting on the set of his film Rust. The actor and producer posted the almost 13-minute video on his verified Instagram account on New Year's Day that he captioned, "Another chance to let go of anything that is hurting us, destroying us." Now, this is an example of the type of language that I think is very harmful for his own situation, and part of the thing that pisses so many people off about the celebrity types in Hollywood is just a total abdication of responsibility, which you kind of see in that title there. So he starts off the whole thing by talking about this woman at a coffee shop that gave him a bag of Splenda with the phrase written on it, "So many people care about you." And then he talks about how he lost it, and then he was obsessively looking for it, and then he showed like a bunch of other examples of how people had reached out to him saying, "We care about you, we're sorry that this is happening, we feel bad for you." And he goes on for this for about 4 minutes, which is a little bit weird. At first, it seemed like, okay, there's people out there caring about it. He does this for 4 minutes in a 13-minute video, and I had two thoughts about this, really, which was, why continue to do this routine? It seems to be an extension of what this whole routine always is, which is just, there's nothing to see here. I am in a lot of ways a victim. I think that's what a lot of this comes out to, is being very frustrating whenever people hear this type of stuff. It is very much I'm a victim in terms of what's going on here. And the thing is that in a weird way, and I know that this is literally a live stream about Alec Baldwin, but this is not about him in so many ways. It's very easy to make it about him because of how high profile he is. But like with the ABC interview, this is very actively making it all about him and really making it worse. I honestly think that if he had not said anything at all, nobody would care at all. The best thing for everyone, especially him, but the best thing for everyone, the family grieving, everyone else that was on the set that went through this terrible tragedy, is to just shut up. So he then goes on to say that he's not afraid to say that Halyna Hutchins died. The only time that he mentions Halyna Hutchins in this New Year's video is whenever he says, "I'm not afraid to say it, she did die tragically." And he said, I'm going to couch that in some euphemism, someone died very tragically. And what he said next is, I am a bit at loss of words as to what it actually means. But he goes, "Somebody died very tragically." Next sentence, "And I have gotten so much, I mean so much goodwill from people, it's just incredible." And I would say go watch the video. The video is on his Instagram. But there is a very alarming level of disconnect between his role in this tragedy and the severity of what actually happened. It kind of draws back to, in that ABC interview, one thing that kept being repeated, and one thing that his lawyers have even been repeating, that there was one thing that Halyna and I had in common, and that was that neither of us knew that the gun was loaded. And this and all the attitude of steering the investigation, which happens many times in this video, even to just look at how the bullet got on the set. Yes, someone did die very tragically. And it's right of him as well, because of course he's going through something to, thank people for that. But to mention that someone died tragically, to not mention at all in any way that you had anything to do with it, and to go straight to, "I've gotten so much goodwill from people," it's a very strange way of kind of just turning a blind eye to what's actually going on. It's a scary level of being out of touch, and I guess that's probably the best. Yeah, it's just very strange. I find it very strange. Watch the video. I would implore you to watch the video on your own, because it is very odd. He then goes on to say that he is not much of a New Year's resolution type guy. And again, he goes on for a whole minute giving examples of, he said that he gave up smoking, he gave up drinking, he's trying to eat healthier. And then he makes jokes about saying things like, "Oh, but every now and then I still have a peanut M&M, and I have a pizza every now and then. I'm not the perfect guy." Creepy stuff, like very, very creepy stuff. And around this same moment is whenever he, talks to people that are not in support of him and saying, "I don't want any of your negativity," which I also, out of touch, I think might be a nice way of saying it. Diluted, like purposefully diluted, I would hope purposefully at least, would be a harsher way of saying it. But he says that what he does want in this new year, and I think that this is a bit of a pivotal moment as to why it's important to kind of look at this statement that he's making. He says that what he wants in the new year is that he wants to get rid of all negativity that affects him in his life, which I would say he's setting himself, what he seems to do, and I would expect this is going to happen a lot more, he sets himself up for these moments where if anyone in the world was at all worried about your character, if anybody was wanting to admit to any level of responsibility at all, he puts himself like in these perfect moments to where he gets him a running start to say, I'm sorry, or I feel bad, or I don't want anyone to think less of my family. I hold a certain level of responsibility. I reach out to the families, anything like that. Anything that kind of shows like, okay, like you made a mistake and there'll be some type of punishment maybe. No, instead it's always this like, I don't want any negativity to affect me. All of this while no mention of the family, no mention of the child, no mention of the woman herself, just kind of, I don't want any negativity to affect me at all. It's just still more examples of being very out of touch, and I think that's something that, delusional. Thank you, Vintage Web 82. It's definitely a scary level of delusion, and I don't know how rampant this is. We'll get to the other actor statements later that have come out, particularly George Clooney and Nicolas Cage. It's very strange to see, I think, the amount of anger and the amount of, just delusion that's going on in this whole situation with him. He then goes on to say, well, actually, no. Another thing on this one that I was thinking about is that what exactly does negativity mean? He says he wants to get rid of negativity in his life, and I feel like that would have to either be two things. It would either be internal emotion, meaning like, a level of guilt, a level of remorse that's, eating away at you, even if he doesn't want to say guilty, or external attacks. And why I think that's important is that it points to whenever the trial actually does happen and the media kind of catches up to this a little bit more, I feel like Baldwin will, in the end, have created a very poisonous pit for himself with all of these statements that he's making, and he's going to be stuck in it. Because on the first one, if it's an internal emotion of guilt and you feel like that's a lot of negativity, then okay, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense, and I feel like there's a type of way you could phrase a statement that says, I feel bad, but also I don't think that I'm responsible for this. But he doesn't go for that at any point. Instead, he very regularly speaks about these external attacks that happen from people online, or people take pictures of him outside and he doesn't like that, and how that hurts him. And it feels like that's the type of thing that he's talking about. And again, going back to this ABC interview that he did, he said again and again that he does not want to be seen in any way as a victim. And what I think is more sad in a way is you don't like seeing someone kind of shoot themselves in the foot and then, act like it wasn't their fault. It's just kind of sad and weird. Is that I don't think that he sees that throughout all of this, it is very actively making himself a victim through all of these statements. And it's sad to watch someone like this, especially who is a pretty good actor, not see that they are acting themselves through a very poorly written narrative. Vintage Web 82 does say it, I think is correct. The Hollywood lifestyle does really eat away at people's brains. And the actors or producers, people that I have liked more, particularly directors that are successful, people like Stanley Kubrick, actors like Matthew McConaughey. I think that there are some people that do recognize that you have to shut yourself away for a very large amount of time. I don't actually know those people. They could have been, just as deluded. But I feel like there is a type of person that really sinks themselves into the attention to a degree that they don't actually know how to connect with people anymore. And it seems like there's a lot of this going on because each time these statements come up, the statements literally become nothing but complaining about the level of negative attention that is coming through instead of hey, where did all the positive attention go? We got to get it back somehow. So I'll do a performance piece. I'll go on Instagram. I'll go on ABC. I'll do this. I'll do that. I'll do this. I'll do that. And it's like continually pushing people away more and more, but doing it in a way that seems very, very gross and is kind of destroying your reputation. He then goes on to say, that this has been the worst situation in his entire life, which, I feel like there are probably a few people that rank it as the worst situation in their life, and it probably ranks a little bit higher if you have to rank how bad something can actually be. I feel like that's another one of these. The more time that goes on with all of this stuff, the more it just becomes sad. And that's a very sad statement to make. And I've heard him make it a few times before, that this is the worst situation he's ever been involved with. Like, why actually say that? Because he clearly feels guilty, and that's fine. I feel like that's the thing that's sad. You feel bad about something, and that's fine. You feel guilty, but you don't think that you are the main one responsible. Then say that. That's better than what's going on here. Even if you don't talk about it, just don't talk about it. And I don't think anyone actually cares that much as to not talk about it. The more that you actually continue to talk about this, the more that you make it a story. It's like, I think I mentioned this in the last video. It's like in the Coen brothers movie, The Man Who Wasn't There. He says that the more that you actually look at something, your looking actually changes it. And that seems to be the type of thing that's going on here. By continually talking about it all the time, he is actually creating a new narrative that's very, very bad, and he's making it so that people have to actually step up and say something because he's a powerful person. And I feel like this is eventually going to get to the point where it's like, you can't really get away with this. I think it's testing the limits as to what someone can actually get away with when they're this high up in a hierarchy like Hollywood. And then he goes into this very religious way of thinking about forgiveness and acceptance and peace and not wanting to see things in life in terms of good and bad, which is very strange because throughout his entire career, he's never spoken like that. And while there's a certain level of, I feel like that's kind of it, because of his past and because he is an actor and because he doesn't take any responsibility, this rings as a huge manipulation and incredibly hollow and very unfortunate that he's actually saying this type of stuff. If he paired this type of a statement with an acknowledgement that he is sorry or that he feels bad or that he feels anything, I feel like that is a proper thing to say. But couching that type of phrasing in a world, I do think that that might be an example of, I think that's an example, a micro example of the way that people view this industry in a very large way. Not taking things seriously, but whenever there's trouble that comes around the corner, that's whenever you have to, that is when you actually have to take things seriously. Let's see. Sorry, got a little message there that we had a problem with the streamer. I'll just, to repeat that real quick. The sad part of this is that he asks for mercy in a very selfish way that I think is a micro example of how people view the film industry as a place that feels like they have all this power, but then whenever they do something wrong, they're allowed to kind of just ask for mercy and forgiveness in a very stylish way. I don't think anyone takes that seriously. I apologize if there was a bit of an interruption in the stream there. But again, more examples of being very, very scarily out of touch, and I think that we do need to continue to follow this because I think that the way that this plays out is going to be something that affects more how it is that people interact with the film industry, which is already very, very lacking. And to go to what it is that Hollywood is actually saying, which I hope continues to be even more sour, especially if he continues to act this way. We know that George Clooney came out in a way that I think was very helpful in putting perspective as to how we should actually be thinking about this. George Clooney said every single time that he's handed a gun on set, he said every single time they hand me a gun, I look at it, I open it, I show it to the person that I'm pointing it at, show it to the entire crew. Everyone does this, everyone knows. I think the real importance of that statement existing from someone like George Clooney is that it holds a celebrity's feet to the fire in terms of reason. It's very difficult to do that. The entertainment industry, it's incredibly easy to be flippant, to talk about large issues in a way that, you're not actually talking about anything important, but to walk away with some type of like virtue signaling thing. I was very happy that George Clooney did that, and Nicolas Cage did the same thing recently. He explained that he believes that an actor's responsibility is to be educated in so many different areas of their craft. And the way he said this, he said, I don't want to blame anyone about this, but there is a certain level of responsibility. I don't want to cast blame, but I do think, and he says, I'm not talking about anybody, but people don't like the word movie star. We want to be humble actors. A movie star is very different because whenever you reach that level, there's a kind of presentation. You need to know how to ride a horse. You need to know how to fight. You need to know that you're going to do fight scenes. You need to know how to ride a motorcycle. You need to know how to drive stick shift. You need to be able to drive sports cars. and you need to be able to know how to use a gun. You do. You need to take the time to know what the procedure is. Those are part of the jobs that we have in our profile. He then goes on to say more like, you need to know what it means to be a stuntman. You need to know what it means in terms of lots of different people that are working as the crew, people that you're going to be interacting with, and that there is a certain level of expertise with dangerous equipment that other people know. But you need to take the first step as someone working with this equipment to, take a level of responsibility. And Peter Dinklage from Game of Thrones steps in at one point saying that he was anti-gun and we should move away from it, which I think is a stupid idea. That's movies that do that are going to be very... those movies are going to be lacking, and they're not going to have a level of quality. It's going to be the difference of like a G.I. Joe movie and John Wick. You lose a level of physicality on that. But anyway, that's a rabbit trail. I was happy that Nicolas Cage stepped out and said this. I think more actors need to be stepping out and talking this way, because everyone has eyes on the Alec Baldwin story. I think it's a very important story. Anytime there's a piece of news that comes out about it, I don't think it's the news that is important as people wanting to see, how are we going to react to this? I think that there is a level of connection missing between the audience and the film industry, and I think a lot of people want it to remain. And I think this is a test in terms of the stream. But then Peter Dinklage is pissing away all his goodwill he gained in Game of Thrones. That is, he really is. That's very frustrating. And I think if we're back now, everyone, I apologize if we are coming in and out, but we are coming out in and out a little bit, it seems. I'll go ahead and end the stream there. I'll bring up the Golden Globes and the awards story later on whenever we do another show here in about 35 minutes. And, thank you everyone that has been watching, that's been joining along with the stream. And thank you very much for following, and subscribe for future updates on reviews and movies.